Hi, Dr. Nick. So good to be back in the podcast room with you, and good to be back, right? Because we've been away for a little while, and so interested to kind of hear a checkup from you to see how things have been going. I know you've been in recoveries for some time, so how you been?
Well, our loyal listeners, I'm sure, have been wondering why we haven't had an episode drop in a while, as we're nearing the end of our first season here with our developmental asset covering. But we had to take a slight detour because I had total hip replacement surgery on my right hip, and that was now exactly 5 weeks ago. And during the first 3 of those weeks, I was off from work, where I was unable to go into work. And this was my first time I've ever had surgery also. So there was a lot of learning during the first couple weeks. Several things I learned were that I planned way too many fun sitting around activities for myself. Okay. For the first 2 weeks, I did nothing but sit in the recliner, watch Hallmark Christmas movies, and watch murder shows on ID Discovery. So literally for 2 straight weeks, that is what I did. In addition to my PT and my walking, I also did those 2 things. But all I could do was take narcotics and watch either Hallmark Christmas movies or ID murder shows, which interestingly, and this is why I love Hallmark Christmas movies so much, is that I would go into a drug-induced sleep or a needed sleep because I had to sleep in the recliner for the first 2 weeks, and I'm a side sleeper. So sleeping on my back in a recliner really didn't work for me.
Yeah.
So I would be falling asleep everywhere all the time. But you could fall asleep during the first hour of one Hallmark Christmas movie, wake up during the second hour of the next Hallmark Christmas movie, and pick up the plot and keep going as though it's the same movie. So very simple. Occasionally, the murder ones were a bit harder to follow when that would happen because we'd go from like San Francisco to the desert of Arizona, and I'm like, wait a minute, what someone is this a cross country murder spree, or did I fall asleep? Clearly, I fell asleep. So between that, a lot of Dancing with the Stars, where the finale of is coming up next week, so that's exciting, and The Golden Bachelor. Really is all I needed. I thankfully in the 3rd week I wound up reading a book and started playing some video games as the PT and the exercise ramped up, and was able to go on our camping trip to Virginia, where Danielle had to do all the driving and most of the heavy lifting for the trip there. But yeah, as a quick update, 5 weeks in, went to the surgeon, saw my surgeon on Friday, so I got some X-rays and got to see how it's coming along, and surgery went great. Both my legs are actually equal in length now, which is a new thing.
That's a good thing, yeah.
And he said that he did the tests, range of motion and stuff on my legs, watched me walk a little bit, and said everything's going really well. So I'm very, very excited to be 5 weeks in and have things going pretty well at this point.
Yeah, that is a fantastic update. And Nick, I was going to ask you, since you've been watching a lot of Hallmark Christmas movies this year, if any new ones stood out, but maybe they all just kind of blended together. If there was, or was there one that kind of jumped out as really good?
No. There's several new ones this season that have jumped out at me. However, I'll just tell you my favorite one thus far this season, and we still have a long way to go. They started the new Hallmark Christmas movies on Halloween, basically. So you got 2 or 3 new ones every week. So there's been a ton of them. As you know, Rick, one of my rules is I do not watch any Hallmark Christmas movie that has the word royal in the title. So, the ones that are about royalty, the royal princess, the not so royal. If royalty's in the title, I can't watch it. So that I have to have a boundary. Those are, and any Hallmark Christmas movie that takes place in another country, I will not watch. That's my limit. So my favorite.
So really, that narrows things to Christmas tree farms and lodges that are going to go out of business, basically.
It's a lot of that, Rick. There's quite a bit of that, actually. Yes. And usually, not anymore, of course, but Candace Cameron Bure used to be in a lot of those.
Yeah.
However, this year it's called My Christmas Guide.
Okay.
And it's about a man who has gone blind, who's lost his sight. His daughter wants him to get a seeing eye dog to help him get his self-confidence and happiness back. And it's at Christmas time, and it just so happens the woman who runs the guide dog business happens to be the one who gets him his dog and starts teaching him how to, how the guide dog situation works. Turns out her boyfriend is not very nice. He goes away for a golf trip and is mean and all that stuff. And you can kind of piece the rest of that together.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, as we go
And
there.
sparks
So,
fly.
but
Yeah, I gotcha.
sparks fly. But a couple things I like about it: the actor is actually blind who plays the lead in the show, and they actually do quite a bit of real life is not the right word, but the guide dog parts are actual. They use real guide dogs and explain real training techniques.
Oh, cool.
So some of it's actually pretty cool and looking at how these guide dogs work and stuff like that. So,
that's fantastic. Yeah. Oh, good.
Yeah. So far, that's the favorite. How about you, Rick? How is the holiday season at the Albright house getting ready to kick off and progress now that we're into December here?
Yeah, it's been going good, Nick. I've been doing a lot of different stuff, but let me just I'll jump forward to today. So today they had a special at Wonderworks. I don't know if you know about Wonderworks, Nick. Wonderworks is a science museum for kids. And the gist of it is that it's a movie theater that was standing, and then a tornado hit a mansion in a different part of the state and lifted it up and plopped it upside down right on top of the movie theater. So that's what it looks like. If you look up Wonderworks, if you just Google Wonderworks, you'll see there's 2 locations. Amazingly, this happened twice, right? The 2 different tornadoes did the exact same thing.
Crazy.
It's amazing. But one of them was in Tennessee, in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, and the other one happened in Orlando, Florida. But we went to the one in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, just about 2 hours from our house today. And they had a special today. It was all Tennessee residents got admission for $15, which is like less than half price. And wow. We have a blast. We just had so much fun there, and my littles loved it. My 10 and 8-year-old Toby and Holly loved it. Bryson, Kaylee's boyfriend, came along and hung out with us and did the laser tag and did all the ropes courses and the climbing walls and the pitching machines, which I hurt my shoulder throwing a 70-mile-per-hour pitch. I was like, I pitched like 2 of them, and then my shoulder was hurting. I was like, okay. I have no idea how they pitch 105 and don't hurt, don't destroy themselves. But anyway, it was a fun time. We kind of had a blast there and checking out Pigeon Forge a little bit this close to Christmas. Just a lot of fun. So that's what we were doing today.
I bet. Did you guys do any like driving around to see decorated stuff in Pigeon Forge? Because they have so many different attractions.
Yeah, they really do. We went to the Christmas store. We had a kind of a picnic lunch by the Christmas store, and we went in there, and that's just an awesome place. It was super crowded, obviously, because we're only weeks away from Christmas, but that was kind of a blast. We went to the Russell Stover's factory outlet store and got some good cheap chocolate. We went to Buc-ee's. Nick, did you go to a Buc-ee's when you were No, it wasn't open yet, was it?
No, it wasn't open yet. But the one we drove, the one that was not yet open, that was being built up by Pigeon Forge. They said it's the largest one. Yeah, it's open now?
That's the one we went to. It was my first time in that one. And that thing is gigantic. It's basically a department store. And it's amazing. So I always get banana chips and chocolate covered banana chips because they're so perfect there. It was great stuff. So, it was a fun day. We just had a really good time. And big news today, Nick, we were discussing before we kind of started the show today that Liberty University, where we kind of went and visited a few weeks ago, got a huge news today, right? Folks may be listening. This could be old news when they're listening, but they have a January 1st college football bowl game, right? The Fiesta Bowl, where they're going to play number 8 Oregon. This is big news for Liberty. It makes you wonder if they're more excited and happy about that or provisional status as a tier 1 university based upon breakfast cereal selections.
I have it on good authority, Rick. As you know, in 1997, when I was the Nittany Lion mascot, I had the opportunity to go to the Fiesta Bowl when Penn State defeated Texas. And I spent a lot of time with the Fiesta Bowl Selection Committee. This is the committee that chooses the teams that plays. They made it clear that there are several criteria important to them. One of the biggest criteria is the fan base that will come to the game, that will travel to Arizona for the bowl game, and the fan base that will tune in on TV. But a close second place from a factor consideration for that Fiesta Bowl committee is tier 1 cereal status.
Wow.
In the dining commons. And it's too much of a coincidence to think that Liberty was just weeks ago awarded, right? Provisional Tier 1 certification. And then all of a sudden they get their first New Year's Day Fiesta Bowl Rose Bowl.
Wow.
I think it speaks for itself.
Yeah, and so really, what you're saying is that Liberty really owes a lot to the excellent EdVenture for this amazing opportunity to play on New Year's Day.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, their undefeated season, their strength of program that has been building for over 3 years now, all of those other factors. I don't want to diminish that accomplishment, but really, it was the breakfast cereal that I think.
That makes complete sense. I would expect a phone call, probably both of us, from President Don DeCostin at some point this week. I haven't gotten it yet, but of course the selection just happened today, so I'm sure
today's a busy day, but by tomorrow at the latest, we should be getting some.
You would think so.
You would imagine, yeah, at least some swag. I would think something.
That would be great, because the swag in the bookstore there is really expensive, right?
Expensive.
So expensive. Yeah,
Good Lord. Yes, it sure
All
was.
right. Hey, let's keep going, Nick. You've got an amazing blog for us today, and so I'll turn it over to you, and you can kind of get us going in that direction.
All right. So as our listeners know, you can go to excellentedventure.com, click on the top right, the blog and the brochure, and they'll give you all of our blog posts. We're closing in on 30 blog posts here. And this week is the third in my series of 16 keys to effective leadership. So these are the keys 9 through 12. Here we go. Effective educational leadership is pivotal for nurturing a learning environment conducive to student success. Drawing from 25 years of experience and insights from esteemed colleagues, let's delve into rules 9 through 12 of successful educational leadership. Rule number 9. You get more bees with honey. Kindness and diplomacy are vital in cultivating strong relationships. Research in the American Journal of Education shows leaders who exhibit empathy and understanding are more adept at resolving conflicts and securing support. Here's a parable illustration. In a small village, there were 2 teachers. One was strict and unyielding, often scolding students for their mistakes. The other teacher, however, approached with kindness, praising efforts and gently correcting errors. Over time, the students of the kind teacher showed remarkable improvement in engagement, not out of fear, but out of respect and a genuine desire to learn. This story exemplifies how positive reinforcement and empathy can yield better results than harshness or criticism. From pop culture, a memorable example of this comes from the movie Tommy Boy. In a scene, Chris Farley's character Tommy persuades a waitress to serve them food even though the kitchen is closed. He achieves this not through demands or anger, but by being charming and kind. This humorous yet poignant moment illustrates how a positive approach can often accomplish more than a negative one, a valuable lesson in leadership and interpersonal interactions. We do have that whole scene linked from YouTube on the blog post here. Rule 10, hire the best, don't settle. Jim Collins, in his seminal book Good to Great, emphasizes the importance of assembling a talented and dedicated team. By getting the right people on the bus and in the right seats, organizations create a strong foundation for long-term success. Now, a personal anecdote. In my career, I once witnessed a situation where my head principal, this was John Nodecker, faced a dilemma just 2 days before the school year started. A candidate for a teaching position was available, but they were not the best fit for that position. Despite the time pressure, the principal decided to wait. Miraculously, a more suitable candidate appeared shortly after. This decision not only filled the position with a more competent teacher, but also set a higher standard for our hiring process. The experience taught me the value of patience and not settling for less. We also linked the Jim Collins piece there. Where he talks about getting the right people on the bus in the right seats. Rule 11, listen twice as much as you speak. Effective communication includes active listening. A study in the International Journal of Educational Management found that leaders who actively listen to their staff members experienced improved team dynamics and increased staff satisfaction. Some Native American wisdom. There's a wise Native American saying that the Creator gave us 2 ears, 2 eyes, and only 1 mouth, so we should listen and observe twice as much as we talk. This principle reminds leaders of the importance of being attentive and considerate to the perspectives and needs of others. Finally, rule number 12. Extreme accountability is necessary for long-term success. Leadership success hinges on taking full responsibilities for one's actions and those of their teams. This is a cornerstone of Jocko Willink's philosophy in extreme ownership. Willink argues that true leadership entails embracing both triumphs and failures. It involves a transparent assessment of mistakes, learning from them, and proactively making changes for improvement. This mindset of extreme ownership instills a sense of responsibility and empowerment, leading to higher collaboration, adaptability, and success. Willink emphasizes that problems in a team or organization are leadership problems at their core, and addressing them starts with the leader's willingness to acknowledge and correct them. A report by the National Center for Educational Leadership found that accountability in leadership is directly correlated with improved student performance. Doug Reeves's 90-90-90 research also shows that schools at incredible disadvantages overachieved because they took full ownership of every aspect of student success in their buildings. It's easy to get caught up in a victim instead of victor mentality. As a leader, many things happen under us that we can't control. But when we accept ownership of those things, it changes our perspective on how to address it to make things better. These principles are instrumental in navigating the complexities of educational leadership and fostering an environment where educators and students alike can excel.
Nick, these are so good. I mean, I mentioned before, as you've gone through these, that each of them could be their own kind of emphasis for a podcast. They're all so good, so much wisdom kind of in these. Let me just kind of share a few of the reactions I've got to some of these. Let me start with the last one. That last one I think is relevant to one of the developmental assets that we're going to talk about today. Number 37, I think, is going to relate to this, which tells me that some of the building blocks of taking this kind of an approach are start in childhood, right? That we want to nurture and set up a foundation for these things, so that folks approach, take responsibility for things, right? And feel like they have some ownership and control and are empowered to take responsibility for that which they're tasked to take responsibility for. So I think we're going to come back to that one a little bit when we dig back into the developmental assets in a few minutes. What is it? Number 11, listen twice as much as you speak. I love this. I love this kind of saying, and kind of the backstory to this is beautiful. It reminded me of that kind of off-quoted Theodore Roosevelt. Remember this one, Nick? People don't care about how much you know until they know about how much you care. Right? That's what came to mind as I was reading that. Yeah, it's so important for everybody, and maybe especially, right? I'm a counselor. I'm a professional counselor. I teach counselors. And this is so true for us, right? I mean, I think it's so true for anybody who works with kids, but particularly, especially counselors and school counselors. Yeah, that we have to, what we call active listening, right? Where we're not checking our cell phone while kids are talking to us, where we are actively engaged. We are perfectly present. And that's not easy either. I would add to that. We're not used to that. We're being present in the moment, trying to experience and kind of empathize with what the person is talking about that we're talking to. And what I find sometimes the new counselors is they get worn out quickly with that kind of attention. And you think, well, what you're doing is listening. That's not hard. It actually is really hard. If you devote your entire attention for 40, 50 minutes, right, to what somebody is saying and what somebody's experiencing, and also letting your mind be creative on how to kind of help them see things from a different perspective, or to try to understand what they're truly saying and their experiences, years of experience boxed up into a 10-minute, right, session. I mean, it's incredibly difficult, and it kind of, people get worn down. I think they do kind of grow stamina over time, but it's exhausting. It's exhausting. This kind of rather, I don't know, the process of counseling where you're mostly just sitting and listening is incredibly exhausting. And I think sometimes that surprises folks who go into the field and who do it right, and who develop the stamina to do it right and really empathize with kids. So let me back up. These two, actually, number 10 and number 11, kind of reminded me of one another. You talked about kind of hiring the best, but not settling, right? And kind of expecting, waiting, having faith and expectancy. Those are two terms that we've used before on the podcast. Yeah. Believing that things will happen, and it really kind of develops this forward momentum, which it's not magical, but it provides you with forward momentum to see these things through. If you're patient and believe in things and you work towards them, good things happen for people who have forward momentum and are looking for things to work out in optimistic, positive ways. Both of those, 10 and 11, requires so much patience, so much patience. And I think early in my career as a counselor, it's something I really struggled with as a counselor. I think it's something I struggle with personally, is having patience. But as a counselor, I struggled with it early, of just, I wanted things to work, right? My job is helping kids. I want them to get better. And now, I don't want to wait till a month from now. I want it to
Yep.
happen now. And it's hard. But I think the more experience you get in the profession, the more you see that things just take time. Sometimes the results kind of happen later. Sometimes it's tilling the soil, it's planting the seeds, it's watering, you don't see anything for a long time, but then if you're doing the right things and you're having faith and you're expecting success, and you're having patience by trusting your profession, trusting your training, if you're a spiritual person, trusting God, and just moving forward with optimism and expectancy. Again, good things happen, but it's a matter of kind of being patient. So I think that was kind of similar for me for both 10 and 11. And then back to 9. I love the Tommy Boy
Right.
clip there. Is so good. It's so good. And gosh, I always kind of try to see things through the lens of kind of a counselor, right? And so important. I mean, I know you just said that, patience to be sure. And the idea of control and responsibility, so important for us as counselors, but this one especially too, right? This idea of attracting more bees with honey. It's that being super kind, right? And for us, kind of the terminology we would use in counseling or school counseling in particular would be being visible and approachable. That last one especially, being approachable, right? And for me, some of that is smiling. As silly and as simple as it is, smiling, of being approachable, of being warm and attentive and approachable. That matters. It allows kids to see you as a person who cares and is gentle and nice and someone you could go to for help. And certainly that's true of counseling and the counselors and the counseling profession, but it's also true kind of across the board, right? Anybody who works with kids, just kind of giving off that kind of sense that you're approachable and you care and you want to help. For some of us, that's a big goofy smile. For me, it's a big goofy smile. For other people, maybe it's not exactly that, but one way or another, the words you say or the affect you express, that you're sharing with kids, that you're a kind person and you want to do good. And not only important kind of with towards the kids, but also with your colleagues, right? That you're working with, is you're kind of giving off that impression to them as well, that you're things are positive and you want to be optimistic and move forward and make things work. And maybe that's easier said than done, because it's, the work of counseling and of teaching and education is stressful and hard and frustrating. But maybe that's why it's even more important to have that kind of an approach and mentality. So I've talked a lot, Nick. These are so beautiful. In general, they are, and especially for the folks tuning in who are my school counseling students presently or in the past, who I know a lot of them tune into the show. So thank you for sharing. These are fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what you said definitely just connects and resonates across different career paths or different, roles, not just in education, but in leadership. There's that old saying that crap rolls downhill, and that's true. And since it's true, we also have to be pretty cognizant that sometimes we're the ones getting dumped on, and then sometimes we're dumping on to other people. So if we can be nice to people, that's the preferred and optimal way to be, especially people who are in a position that is, and lower is not the term that I want, but maybe it's a position that is with your organization that doesn't pay as much or isn't maybe sometimes as respected as much, or they don't get the same benefits that you do in a lot of different ways. And, that's always the way I've looked at whenever I'm traveling to like central office or anything like that. I try to be as nice to everyone there as possible, because those administrative assistant positions and things are they're difficult jobs. They're oftentimes thankless jobs, and those people need a little happiness and a little, like you said, just sometimes a smile from somebody else. You know what I mean? And I've said this to you before, and we've talked about it on the show. I'm terrible with names, but I can remember pretty much anything and everything about a person. You know what I mean? Like just see their face and remember, and then so you just ask how their kids are doing, or a little solace when a pet dies or whatever it is, kind of like helping with things like that. The other piece that you mentioned when you talk about the patience piece, which I think resonates, is one of my favorite quotes goes, proceed as if success is inevitable. And some people find that to be like, well, it's all about, you have to fail too. And I'm like, no. It's not what it means. Like, proceed as if eventually success will be in your hands. It doesn't mean you don't fail. It doesn't mean you don't fall down. It means you have to be patient and do all the things to make, success eventually happen. And a lot of times, especially these days in hiring, that is even more true because there's less qualified candidates out there, and it's easier to settle, and make mistakes. So, but yeah. So with all that said, it brings us to what I think is a relevant discussion as we move into the assets this week as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Nick. These are two more good ones. We're approaching the end, right? We've only got probably this episode and maybe one more, and that will kind of wrap up season 1 here. So we've been working our way through these 40 developmental assets. The Search Institute spent 50 years basically doing a meta-analysis of all the data, basically in response to the question, what helps kids be successful? What helps them thrive, maybe is the better word, right? Despite the world we live in, which is not ideal for anybody, but what helps kids have success and thrive despite those things? And again, we've gone through 36 of them, and we've up to 37 and 38 now. Let's go ahead and tackle maybe one at a time, Nick. Let's do that tonight, and I'll go ahead and read off number 37 and see what our thoughts are. Number 37, a young person feels as though they have control over the things that happen to me or them. Young person feels they have control over the things that happen to them.
Well, Rick, this is my favorite of the 40 developmental assets. And I know you're not supposed to have favorites. I know you're not, we say we don't have a favorite kid. Come on, we all do. I'm kidding. I love both my kids. But this is my favorite asset because this is what I believe is such a big component of life success. And again, we've talked about this at points on the show, but just to quickly summarize it, especially in my years teaching students with emotional needs, I kind of came to the conclusion that there were two types of people in the world. And I couldn't really put it into words at the time other than to say, man, it's like there's people who the world does onto them and they can never win. And then there's people who they do onto the world. They control what they can. And later, I finally heard the quote by Jim Rohn, R-O-H-N, which super successful business entrepreneur back from, I think, as far as the 50s. He goes way back. And his quote was, either you run the day or the day runs you. And that's been our motto at my school for years now, because it sums everything up. Now, I know it's only one of the 40 assets. However, and we said it in the blog post today, you're either a victor or you're a victim. That philosophy, the way you conduct yourself through challenges and through trauma and adversity, that determines, I think, in such a large regard, your potential emergence from these challenging situations. And that's strictly a philosophy, a mindset that you can control. And you said it, Rick, a dozen times. Our brains are programmed to be negative. You need to do 10 positive things to overwhelm one of the negative things that happen. So that's why these kids, my students hear it every day. Either you run the day or the day runs you. Every time something bad happens, you say that, and then you think about it, and then you say, how can I run the day instead of letting the day run you? Now, there are days. Sometimes we'll get to the end of the school day, and me and my 2 assistant principals will sit down, and we'll look at each other, and we'll say, the day ran us today. It just did. We lost. But again, it's a mindset. It's a philosophy. And you hate to say it's what winners do, but I think it leads to more success that way. So this one is just so important to me, Rick.
Yeah, Nick. Yeah. So much truth built into this. And I think there are some constructs in the field of psychology that are relevant to this as well. And the one that jumps out is one that most of our listeners probably are familiar with, and that's Angela Duckworth's grit, right? This is a gritty mindset, right? Is I'm going to take control of the things I can control and move forward despite the obstacles. And using my strengths to overcome. So that's one of the things. The other one that kind of comes to mind for me is something we call locus of control.
Oh,
If you're
yeah. All
looking at
right.
the research, you're looking at an
Okay.
internal locus of control, this
Yes.
idea that I can control my environment. I can have a strong
Yep.
influence on my environment, the people around me. And that there's all kinds of positives that come, right? That's what research tells us about locus of control is when it's internal, oh wow, good things happen. When it's external, when we feel like we don't have much influence or control over the environment we're in, it's disempowering, right? And it's unmotivating, demotivating, whatever that might be. And as I work with school counselors, that's one of the biggest struggles that they're facing in schools today. And I'm guessing you're seeing it a lot too, is Nick, is just kids who are not motivated. They just apparently don't have it. It got snuffed out somewhere along the way, or the challenge is too high, or lots of different reasons why we probably could say that. But kiddos who just are not motivated to succeed in school. Yeah.
And
go ahead.
yeah, no. I love the use of internal locus of control there, because that really puts a research backed it's some backbone, some foundation to what I'm giving, because I'm speaking in generalities. You know what I mean? Like that, you've defined an actual scientifically researched term that's validated. And just to throw one more thing in there, because I think that using Duckworth as the example, her research really, really got simplified and blown way out of proportion by people on the internet. Like social media helped. Social media didn't help her get big. Her research did that. But simplifying it on this quick, absorption of social media didn't help, because it's too simplified what she was trying to say. And a lot of this oversimplification led to what people now call toxic positivity. You know what I mean? Like, always, looking at the bright side, when meanwhile, there's missiles raining down on you. You have to have some sense of realism. And that is never what Duckworth was about. In fact, her research on resiliency and grit really comes back to the developmental assets in a lot of ways, as you referenced. So I think it's important for people to realize that resiliency isn't just saying, pick yourself up and brush yourself off. No, resiliency has to be taught. There are skills that build grit. You don't just have it. There's a reason the people who do have grit have it. You know what I mean? And and if you follow those people and you really break it down and interview them and study their lives, you can find out what those things are. And that's what the 50 years of research here has contributed to, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I talk a lot about expectancy, building expectancy with my school counseling students, and one of the mistakes that folks make is jumping too quickly to the positive. You mentioned it, right? Is that toxic positivity? Look, sometimes things just suck. We need to be with kids in the suck long enough to where that we get it and they know we get it, right? And if we try to skip past that, they won't follow us. They won't follow us. So counselors and therapists need to be with kids in the suck. That's not a real beautiful way to say that, but that's the truth. The kids need to know we're in there with them. We get it. We're with them before they're ready to move forward. And sometimes that takes 10 minutes. Sometimes that could take 10 sessions or even a couple years till people are ready to kind of move forward because they're stuck in that. So, great point about the toxic positivity. Two other quick thoughts here, Nick. I think teachers, counselors, administrators, I think any coaches, anybody who's working with kids, they can help kids, I think, with this kind of internalized locus of control, or this feeling as though they have control over their environment, what happens or influence. I think one of the ways we do that is by empowering kids, by letting them invest in the choices they make, the rewards they get, setting goals, and the negative consequences too, through forced choice, not necessarily open-ended. Well, you acted out in class today and were cheated off your friend. What do you think your punishment should be? That's very open-ended. That may fit in some situations, but I'm not necessarily saying that. It could be a forced choice. And we discovered you cheated off a friend. So do you think would you prefer to take this test again with a 10% penalty, or would you prefer to meet with the student and your teacher and talk about how sorry you are, or your feelings, or the reasons why? Right? So we give them some choices. I think that's what I'm getting at. Maybe not great examples here, but we give choices for kids about the consequences. We give choices to them about the rewards that they're working for, or the goals that are being set. And that's another way, right, to help them to kind of feel as though they have some influence over their situation and they're not powerless.
Yeah. And that ties directly back, Rick, to the developmental asset. I think it's 30. It's focused on responsibility, and it's a very similar asset in a lot of
Yeah.
regards.
Yeah.
But it ties directly to what you're talking about. And the bottom line is too that like being in the suck with the kids, a lot of
Yeah.
times there are situations where there is no win
Yeah.
for the kid, and the best we can do there is sometimes maybe it's just how to not get to let it further pile on. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Yeah.
how to stop the hole from being completely burying you. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And then trying to find a different way out of that. There's not always a bright, like you said, it's not always a bright side. There's not always a Pollyanna, and we need to accept that sometimes. And that's real life. And that leads to sometimes being able to then get yourself out of that spiral, that cycle. So
Absolutely.
very important.
Yeah, Nick, that reminds me too that we don't have control over or influence over everything. I think natural disasters, right? We can only control how we respond to things sometimes, not necessarily the things that happen to us. So, which reminds me of the Serenity Prayer, right? That's something a lot of folks know is not only used in faith-based settings, but also in very secular settings. And so that the first kind of section of the Serenity Prayer is, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's so much profound truth wrapped up in just that first little part of the Serenity Prayer. Another one comes to mind that I heard recently. Of course, I work in a faith-based setting, but I like this one. I just heard it. Pray like it all depends on God. Work like it all depends on you. I like that one. I like that one.
I love that one.
Yeah. Good stuff. We ready to move on to 38? Or go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Because I love 38 too. I'm just excited.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Number 38. A young person reports having high self-esteem.
Mm-hmm. Let me start with a challenge on this one.
Yeah, good.
And this is my challenge as a parent. Like I have found it much, much easier working with children who biologically aren't mine to help them see the amazing things within themselves that they should be proud of and should give them a sense of self, a high value and self-esteem. Meanwhile, the children that I helped birth, that I participated in their creation, who I should have the most influence on, I find it almost impossible to help them see the beauty in themselves and the power in themselves. And when I look at their self-esteem and wonder many, many, many things, and it forces me to then look back to when I was their age, because it's so easy to, you have to make those comparisons within your own bloodline because there's, genetic pieces to this as well. And I see, and I do reference back, I look back our first couple episodes where we interviewed each other and talked about our families. One of the compliments I paid to my dad was that he believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. And he was always right. And some of the things I'm most proud of in my life, I was able to accomplish because of just his sheer belief. And knowing that he believed in me made it easier to believe in myself. But I look at those situations and at this point I was a little bit older than my children when those things happened for me. But still, that part's really been a struggle for me. So I wanted to start this one off because this one is a big one too, by saying that I definitely don't have all the answers here because I've been unsuccessful in a lot of ways with my own children here, I feel like.
Well, I think another challenge to this, Nick, right, is sometimes our own kids, as much as it might mean to them for us to say those kind of positive things, well, you're dad, you're not objective, right? It's you love me anyway. So you can say positive things, but it doesn't mean that's what everybody else thinks. So, especially for teenagers or preteens who feel like they have that imagined audience that everybody's looking at them and evaluating them. That, Dad, you may love me and think I'm beautiful or funny or have a beautiful singing voice, but that doesn't mean everybody else does. You're just saying that because you love me. I think maybe I kind of thought that when I was a teenager sometimes too. Not the singing voice part. I never got accused of that, but other things. I kind of, is that true? Or is that just, mom just being mom and loving me? So, but it's a good point. But I think maybe you touched on that, Nick. I think that's important that maybe getting on a little later in life, maybe into our 20s, we recognize the wisdom there, and kind of respect that in a little different way from our,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's our parents or our teachers or whoever it might be. That's a good point. We're a little more mature to receive that kind of feedback.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But from there, building into, talking about the, like, what is self-esteem? You know what I mean?
Mm.
And that's one of the things I was like, well, taking a look at that, trying to find not necessarily definitions, but like descriptions that really kind of put a good bow on it. And here's what I found. This is actually from a website called Resilient Kids, and they spell resilient with a Z and kids with a Z. So it's resilient with a Z, kids with a Z.
Mm-hmm.
But they say research shows that young people who feel good about themselves have positive relationships with parents and peers, increased academic achievement, and a decreased susceptibility to negative peer pressure. Loving yourself is as important as loving other people. About 48% of young people ages 11 to 18 report having high self-esteem, according to Search Institute surveys. Telling and showing young people you accept and value who they are helps them to feel good about themselves. So self-esteem, tied to when you, and I think self-love is a powerful word, because we associate love as the highest emotion.
Yeah.
And we're the most critical of ourselves always. Kids are no exception to that, depending on what age group we're looking at. So
Yeah.
curious as to your take on this from the counseling perspective, right?
Yeah, that's interesting, Nick. As you were reading off that definition, I was in my head identifying like at least 3 of the different developmental assets that we've looked at already. That are woven into that definition. So in a way, these things are not mutually exclusive. They're tied together. When we talked about that before, right?
Yes, we have.
If I've got this piece, I've also got this one. They feed on each other, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. That tells us that we can build assets, many at the same time through the same kind of activities and interventions that we provide. Nick, so self-esteem is so global, right? When you look at it from a research standpoint, it's like, in general, how do I feel about myself? From 1 to 100, how do you feel about yourself? That is so broad and general. It's almost not really useful from a kind of psychometric standpoint. And so oftentimes what we look at is multidimensional self-concept. What do you think about yourself when it comes to your athleticism? What do you think about yourself when it comes to your artistic abilities? What do you think about yourself in regards to academics? How do you think about yourself in regards to being a member of your family, right? Those are just different kind of parts to describe how we feel about ourselves that we could also rank and score, that would give us kind of a more narrow kind of understanding of how good we feel or how not good we feel in various kind of parts of our important parts and pieces of our lives. And if you go even more narrow than that, you look at self-efficacy, your how confident you are that you can achieve certain things. And all these things may be correlated, but they're not necessarily correlated. So for example, for me, my self-efficacy for ice skating is about a 0. I fall down. I do like it because it seems like a Christmassy thing to do, but I'm terrible at it. And yet, Nick, it doesn't impact my global self-esteem, because I don't care if I'm good or not. It doesn't impact how I feel about myself as a person, or even as an athlete. It doesn't really get in my way of a kind of a athletic self-concept. So I don't know. That's just one of the kind of things that I try to do in my teaching, is help my students understand that, self-concept is helpful to look at, but there's more to it. There's more to it. You have to dig a little bit deeper than that. But if you're going to go with self-esteem as a measure that you want to study, the big assessment that you'd probably use with kids is Rosenberg's self-esteem scale. It's been used for, 40 years maybe, and it's changed only mildly over that time. And it's also open access, so it doesn't cost anything. In fact, you can just pull it up, just Google it. You can pull up the Rosenberg self-esteem scale. It's like what is it? It's a 10 item. Yeah, it's a 10 item. Questions that students score. Yeah. And what I like to suggest to my school counseling students and my clinical counseling students is, hey, if you're going to use this thing, don't worry about the scores. Use it as the intervention itself. So for example, number 1, on the whole, I'm satisfied with myself. Yes or no, or slightly yes, agree to disagree, right? Depending on how you want to score it. Or at times I think I'm no good at all. And a kiddo says yes. Well, that provides you a great opportunity to do some disputing. And this is some great kind of CBT approach. Is like, that doesn't make sense to me. Explain it to me, because, I saw you out on the baseball kind of field 2 days ago. Or, I'm looking at your grades right now on the computer, right? So help me understand why you feel that way when I don't see that kind of, it's hard for me to see it. So I like to use it as more of an intervention necessarily than a score, pre-test, post-test with an intervention in the middle. But again, that's just me. But there's lots of ways that you could use self-esteem, but I also encourage folks to look a little bit deeper than just kind of this global score, which is maybe not as useful as kind of looking more specific.
Yeah, and Rick, I was going to add just a web link, but like you said, I did that. I was searching while you started. There's about 100 sites that pop up immediately that have the 10 questions and how to score it right on there. And I think that's a great tool or resource you can use here.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, well, there's only 2 left, Rick. 2 developmental assets to go. It's hard to believe.
It sure is. It's been a long journey, over a year in the making. So excited to be looking to kind of put a bow on this thing next time we meet.
Something to think about, Rick, maybe a preview when we move into 39 and 40. For asset 39, which as a preview, it's called sense of purpose. There's a little activity that one of the articles I saw when reading up on the developmental assets, an activity called "What if you live to be 100?" And I think it'd be cool. Maybe we can, when we get to this asset next week, we can talk about what our thoughts are in regards to basically, if you lived to 100, what would you want people to remember about you? Would your actions over the years reflect what you believed in and stood for? How does it shape your sense of purpose? And the reason I think it's interesting to think about, there's two reasons why. And again, we'll talk about this more when we get to it. My ex-wife, Denise, who's mom to Bella and Talia, her grandmother just turned 100 2 weeks ago. And, so that right away, you see someone who's lived for 100 years and you think about that. And there was a conversation last week about some construction project or something here or there that wasn't going to happen for about 15 years or so in our school district. And then I thought to myself, oh man, I'll be long gone by then. And wow, how am I going to define myself? Like, what am I going to be? What will my sense of purpose be when I'm not this anymore?
Yeah.
So all those things got, started, drudging up some thoughts and feelings about this kind of thing. So anyway, when we get there next week, I just thought that'd be cool to kind of look at.
That's going to be a fun one for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll talk about fun as we move into our favorite segment of the show, the Every Rose Has Its Thorn segment.
Great.
Wow. Caffeinated drinks. Almost as difficult to pin down as our breakfast cereal, but I don't have a scale of awesomeness for this one.
This tiered, Nick? That would be cool if you.
No. I don't have it tiered. I have strong feelings, however. So
good.
I'm curious when we move into these where we go. So do you want to kick this one off, Rick? Because I know breakfast cereals, I kind of went off.
I would be glad to do this one, Nick. Yeah, that sounds great to me. So caffeinated beverages. So let me start with my thorns. I've got some thorns here. I don't have just one thorn, but a few of them. And folks at home should know, I might have mentioned it or it's been mentioned in the podcast before for our listeners who tune in every week or every time, that I have super sensitive taste buds. Super sensitive taste buds. In particular, it's the bitter taste. It's a real thing. It's a real thing. I have super sensitive bitter taste buds. And so I'm turned off very quickly by anything bitter. And a lot of the caffeinated beverages are very, very bitter. So for me, like that's like beer. It's not, I just can't drink it because it just doesn't taste good. Or coffee too. I can't, it's just way too bitter. And that's a obviously very popular one. Anything with that coffee or toffee taste is just, I can't do it. In fact, over Thanksgiving, Bryson, I mentioned before, Bryson, right? Kaylee's boyfriend, he brought over, to Thanksgiving dinner, he brought over his special homemade, homegrown in his garden green beans for everybody. They're called Malibu green beans. I think they're only grown in the South, and everybody raved about these green beans. It was like the best green beans we've ever had, and everybody's enjoying them. And Bryson's like, Rick, you got to try the green beans. And I'm like, and he knows I don't eat vegetables. I just don't. I can't. Right. It's bitter. I can't do that. But he says, you have to. You have to. This is the best green bean you'll ever eat in your life. And so, all right, I'm going to do it, but you'll see. And I stuck it in my mouth and I chewed it up and I spit it in the garbage. I gagged. I almost threw up. So I tried the Malibu green beans. And I suppose if you're into green beans that you should probably check out Malibu green beans. But yeah, it goes back to my super sensitive taste buds. So Oh,
I added Malibu green beans to my thing to taste test
yeah.
because I love green beans and green bean casserole.
There you go.
Um,
There you go.
that's
So,
a whole other topic there.
what did I
Vegetables.
say? Thorns. I think I said them in that
Yes.
long-winded
Yes.
statement. Coffee. No, not for me, for sure. Yeah, I think that's my thorn for sure. My rose, I've got a few roses, and Nick, I think you know the first one is the biggest one for me, and I'll mention a few others. The biggest one, sweet tea. I'm addicted to sweet tea. I love sweet tea. I grew up with sweet tea, even though it was Pennsylvania. Our family just had sweet tea all the time, specifically Louisiana
Yes.
tea bag
Yes.
sweet tea. And of course, you make
Mm-hmm.
that at home, which we do it here at our house. But you can also kind of get Louisiana sweet tea at various restaurants. And so I love my sweet tea. I love it very sweet. I do use Splenda to kind of help with the calorie intake a little bit at home, but I'm going through like a gallon a day typically. For me, it's like a gallon of sweet tea a day, and I know that's a lot. But yeah, I'm addicted to my sweet tea. We did a little survey. I don't know if you remember this, Nick, when first time you came down to Tennessee on sweet competition on sweet teas. Yeah,
big competition.
We did. Yeah, at some point. I don't think we've revealed the analysis of that at any time on the
not
podcast.
on the podcast. No, we had a press conference at your house.
Oh, that's right. Right, there was a press conference. Yeah,
press conference. But yeah, that, aside from that, it wasn't released beyond that, which could be a topic for a future podcast.
Yeah, probably
episode,
should
obviously.
be. I imagine folks would be interested. So that's my number one rose. That's my big one. And I'll say, and for other people, Pepsi or Coke, I'm a Pepsi guy.
Okay.
So I do like Pepsi. I will drink it from time to time. I know it's not good for me, so I don't try not to drink it a lot. But I do like Pepsi. And I like Coke's okay as a backup if, the restaurant doesn't serve Pepsi products. So, and if I'm sleepy, I will get a Mountain Dew, for sure. And any of the weird flavors of Mountain Dews that they have now, like those two, Code Reds and things like that. So,
yeah. Although Code Red by itself is hard to find now, because they have made so many other ones. That would be, maybe that's another topic at some point. Too many flavors of the best things ever created.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that leads right into my roses and thorns.
Oh, good.
So I'll start with the roses just because you tied so elegantly into them. Is Mountain Dew definitely my favorite soda of all time? The original Mountain Dew. A Mountain Dew slushie from Sheetz.
Ooh,
incredible. And as you know, Mountain Dew, it has a high caffeine intake.
Yep.
Mountain Dew Zero now, and which used to be Diet Mountain Dew, and they've created the Zero line. Almost tastes like real Mountain Dew. It's close, and I love it. Fantastic. And my second favorite soda, caffeinated beverage soda of all time, is Code Red. So you got regular Mountain Dew followed by Code Red, and Diet Code Red, which you can't find anywhere. I also think is amazing. So from the caffeinated soda perspective, those are my roses. I think they are just fantastic. I was a big fan as a kid of Jolt Cola. And as you remember, I remember the motto for Jolt, all the sugar, twice the caffeine. That was the motto of Jolt Cola. So, what kid wasn't going to want to drink that, right?
Exactly.
Every parent's like, nope, and every kid wanted it. Probably like your Monster drinks and stuff today. In terms of the Coke and Pepsi battle, I am a bigger fan of regular Pepsi. I would choose regular Pepsi over a regular Coke.
Okay.
However, I would choose Coke Zero over Pepsi Zero. So Coke gets the nod there. Now, if you're strictly talking Diet Coke and Diet Pepsi, neither of which I really like anymore, I would have to go Diet Pepsi. So, there is some balance there, but like Coke Zero would be and really, to be honest, like when I'm drinking caffeinated beverages, I do try to avoid the actual sugar. So like you were saying, the Splenda and the sweet tea.
Yeah.
So Coke Zero really is what I drink 90% of the time.
Okay.
Just in our area, Coke tends to be on sale more than Pepsi anyway. So that's what we wind up with. My thorn in this area is an interesting thorn, and that thorn is Ozempic. So as I've mentioned on the show before, I have been on Ozempic and have lost a great deal of weight since starting using the Ozempic. But one of the things it had a side effect to me with was caffeine tolerance. Whereas I used to have an infinite tolerance for caffeine. It didn't matter how much caffeine I had. It didn't affect me. You know
You
what I
can
mean?
still go
It
to sleep,
never.
you're saying? You
I can go
didn't.
to I can go to
Okay.
sleep even though I don't sleep well generally, regardless. But I never got the highs and lows from caffeine.
Huh.
None of that. As soon as I began using Ozempic, I might have been as early as a week into being on the Ozempic. All of a sudden, I would start getting jittery after drinking coffee,
Oh,
even
wow.
decaffeinated coffee.
Uh-huh.
And then I would notice with higher caffeine level sodas, I was getting the same reactions, and that has continued since then. So I now have almost a caffeine intolerance where I have to be very, very careful about how much caffeine
Oh,
I
wow.
take in. The other part I've noticed is that highly caffeinated beverages also have an effect on my stomach issues with from my multiple colonoscopies the past couple months. The gastritis and GERD and diverticulitis all are affected seemingly by caffeinated items. So
Huh.
Ozempic and getting old basically have hampered my enjoyment of caffeine. So those are my roses and thorns.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Nick, you mentioned there, and it's something I forgot to say when I was going through my thorns, but you mentioned, like the Monster drinks and the Red Bull drinks. Do you like those or
No, I really
no?
don't. The Monster Rehab drinks, which aren't carbonated, those are the most tolerable to me, mostly because I think they're iced tea flavored.
Okay.
Like you, I also love sweet tea, but that really, since the Ozempic started, has been running. It's been hurting me as
Okay.
well.
Even
Not the
that, something as low
jitters.
caffeinated as that. Okay.
Yeah, I know, and that's
Wow.
not very caffeinated, but that's
Yeah.
had more of a diuretic / bowel
Huh.
movement effect a little bit
Okay.
that
Hmm.
never was there before. So interesting side effects from
Yeah.
the
Is that
Ozempic
normal?
there.
Have you read about that? Other people get that too, or is that
Yeah, I did. I started reading up specifically on it, and it is a side effect. It turns
okay?
out, and a relatively common one. So, I felt better about that at least. But
Yeah.
I wouldn't trade the benefits for that. I mean, it's been a game changer in a lot of ways.
Okay.
But it is kind of annoying.
Yeah. And I forgot to say those are. I was going to say that when I was talking about my thorns and the my super sensitive taste buds. Though like the Monster drinks, the Red Bull drinks, this is way too bitter for me. I really
Ooh,
don't like them. So only in desperate situation of driving late at night or something would I possibly drink that and get it down my gullet. So yeah,
yeah.
those are
For
thorns.
I would imagine because those I can't even. Those are bitter to me.
Yeah.
And if they taste that way to me, I can't even imagine the effect they would have on you.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty bad. Hmm.
Well, that brings us to
Oh, hey
the
Nick,
mail.
sorry, I
Oh
want to
yeah.
ask you one. I thought of one other thing when we were talking about Coke versus Pepsi.
Oh
Have
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
watched? Have you ever watched the Netflix special, "Dude, Where's My Jet"?
Yes, yes, I did. You told me about it, and I
Oh,
watched
I
it.
did tell you about it. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, because they all do that Pepsi Coke taste test, at the end, and a lot of times
Uh-huh.
they get it wrong, what they thought they liked and what they didn't like. But
It's
that's
it's
that's a,
it's
that's an incredible kind of documentary, I guess, documentary series on the guy who won the Harrier jet, I think is what it was. Am I
yes.
saying that right?
Yep.
Yeah, with the
And
Pepsi
then
points.
the legal battle that followed
Yeah,
was fascinating to me. You know
it
what I
really
mean? But
was.
like, there's just parts of it that are in my mind. I'm thinking, oh, he's got a great point there. And
Yeah.
then I look at the company's perspective when they show how much that actually would have cost, and you're like,
Yeah.
well, clearly that was a joke, but
Yeah.
it's a real. You were
It
right.
really
That
is
was a
good.
very entertaining documentary.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah, good stuff.
Oh.
Check it out on Netflix.
All right. Well, when we go to the mailbag here, we've got an interesting question from Chase from Virginia, and he writes, I read somewhere that you shouldn't ask your kids questions that start with the word why. I do this a lot to figure how they are doing some of the crazy things that they do. So why did you do that? Do you think asking questions that start with why are problematic? And then he ends the question with why or why not? I guess he knew we weren't kids, so it was
Yeah.
okay to to do that.
Yeah. Chase, that's a great question. I'll kind of tackle it first. Chase, why are you asking why questions to your kids? And you sink in, right? What you thought about that, Chase, is you
Mm-hmm.
thought, oh, wait a minute, that's wrong, right? It was judgmental. That's
There you
when
go.
we ask a question. That's why, at least kind of in America and using English is,
Yep.
it suggests, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. And I've had students challenge me on this from time to time because they've said something like, "Well, maybe I want to say to the kids that they shouldn't be doing that." I said, "Okay, then there's probably a different way to say it. If that's what you want to suggest that a student shouldn't be doing something that they're doing, then maybe you ought to say it differently." But if it's like Chase is suggesting, and he just wants to understand why his kiddo is doing some of the crazy things they do, then I would suggest a better way to ask that question would be something like, "Hey, kiddo, Donnie, whatever his name is, help me understand. You're waiting till the night before a test to study for it. So help me understand. And you're expecting to do well on it, right? That's what you really want to know anyway. And that doesn't kind of suggest judgment. You shouldn't do that. What that's saying is, I want to understand that better. You're trying to kind of get to the bottom of what's going on in the kiddo's head. So if that's really what you want to suggest to a kiddo, then ask it in that way. Help me to understand that you're doing this and this is what's happening. How are you putting these things together? I think that's a better way for that. If what you want to say is, hey, quit doing that. If that's why you're using a why question, I would suggest a better way to kind of say that is, I'm worried about you. I'm worried about you trying to study and cram, the night before a major exam and then expecting to do well. I'm worried about you. Right. To me, that's a better way to kind of, suggest, have a suggestion that maybe you ought to try something different. So it's all just kind of, how kids are. And a lot of times teenagers in particular, if you're trying to tell them not to do something, you run the risk at like making the situation worse because of the natural rebellious kind of developmental stage that they're in. So is it that big a deal using a small word? Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But I always kind of tell my school counseling students, hey, you got 10 minutes with a kiddo while they're eating lunch. Try to use the best words you can because you get 10 minutes while they're eating. And so be intentional with the words you use and the way you phrase things. We work towards being an artist with your words. And so look, parents get more opportunity than that, but be intentional, be thoughtful about what you say to kids because you want them to react in the ways that you intended them to react. So those are my thoughts. It's a great question. And the one that we talk a lot about in counseling.
Yeah, I was hoping you were going to basically kind of talk about your rephrasing that you are so good at doing, and that I actually noticed quite a bit in interviews over the weekend during the college playoff football selection, where interviewers are using the term. We're starting interviews with coaches with, "I wonder why," "I wonder if," "I wonder how," things like that, and turning that around, which you've talked about a lot. So
yeah.
I think that alone kind of takes some of that power. The power of negativity off that kind of statement or question.
Yeah.
I'll give you my favorite example of that being used on me and totally throwing me for a loop in a way I never thought I could be thrown off. So one of my and this is one of my favorite stories to tell. I've told it a million times. So I've always been a believer at work, which is flies in the face of what many believe, in that principals and teachers should really dress for the job. And dressing for the job isn't a suit and a tie. Dressing for the job is you're down on the ground with kids. So, don't be sloppy, but be comfortable. Just basically the way I roll. So normally you'll find me in, a pair of regular, plain old, dress pants, nothing fancy, slip-on shoes and like a golf shirt. That's kind of my jam. It's kind of how I roll. And one of my previous bosses was definitely dressed to the nines, impeccable dresser, like sharp, fantastic, and cared about what people looked like, which is totally fine. Like if you're the boss, you get to dictate what that looks like. And she came to see me one day, and I wasn't expecting her, and this is during the summertime. And I was very dressed down in the office that particular day. And she came in, we said hi, and we started talking. And then at what was a very normal transitional point in conversation, she said to me, "Why are you wearing that?" And she said it just like that. And in my mind and in that moment, I couldn't decipher whether she was asking it in the negative or positive. She was able to make that affect. She turned it to, I mean, most likely, I think she was. I get what she was getting at, but more what she was able to do was put it all on me. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
all of a sudden, it was my insecurities and my perception of what I thought she wanted to hear. You know what I mean? It was like, it's a very, very powerful ability to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And it's one of the very few times in my professional career where I was like, big. And my answer was, Rick, after I fumbled for 30 seconds, I just said, because that's what where? I asked the question back almost. So I was, and again, she wasn't looking to be mean or anything like that. It was just, a question. But it was a question that, like you said, can be taken a certain way. And I definitely got inside my own head about it. So when you're a parent, obviously, your conversations with your kids, you're aiming them to be different, because you are a parent. You're not a peer. I'm not saying you're not your child's friend, but you are primarily their parent. Like friendship the characteristics of friendship are something that are different, from a child-parent relationship. You're not always the friend. Sometimes you can't be. So everything you talked about, I think, builds a better bridge to having communication that eventually will be better. So, yeah. Good luck, Chase.
Yes, good luck, Jason. Thanks for the question. Folks, you can continue to send your questions in to excellent EdVenture, EdVenture @gmail.com.
And that brings us to the end of our big episode 29. Episode 30 will be the conclusion of our first season. We'll have the final two assets to discuss, along with Rick's blog post. And man, it's hard to believe, Rick, we've reached the end of the season just about.
And Nick, can I make a suggestion for Rose and the Thorn?
Of course.
In anticipation of our final episode of season 1.
Oh, I think I know where you're going with this. Go ahead.
Season 1.
Yes.
Season 1 of the excellent EdVenture. Your Rose and your Thorn. My Rose and my Thorn.
That's huge. That's going to be big. All right. Well, I think I'm going to put a lot of thinking into that question. That'll be a good one. All right. And for our listeners as well, you can ask yourselves that question. And if you need to go back and rehash any of our podcast episodes, just head to excellentedventure.com, where you can find all those blog posts and episodes. And until then, keep on being awesome.